Hi guys, it's Raj with Pink Chai Living and we are back in my kitchen today. Continuing on our roll of Punjabi inspired recipes, today I'm going to share with you a Makhani sauce, also known as a butter chicken sauce or a shahi paneer sauce. This is a great base sauce to have in your back pocket and also in your freezer. But before we get into cooking this Makhani sauce, I do want to clarify, because we've been talking a lot about like basic Punjabi recipes, Punjabi 101 as far as our cooking goes, and I don't really think of a butter chicken sauce as classic Punjabi food, but I do think it's really interesting that this relatively new dish, which I think really only started being cooked in India post-partition, and I don't remember seeing on menus until about 20 years ago, has become kind of the universal worldwide symbol for Punjabi food, and I recently learned is the most searched for recipe on the internet is how to make butter chicken. So today we're gonna make the sauce, the Makhani sauce or the butter chicken sauce, and then coming up we're gonna share with you a recipe very soon about how I put my butter chicken together. And again, as you can imagine, there are thousands of versions of this recipe, and since it's so new and everybody's been putting their spin on it for the last 10 or 15 years, I don't really know what an authentic or real butter chicken sauce is or Makhani sauce is, but this is my version that I've come up with over the years after trying multiple different versions. And I know I started cooking it because a friend of mine shared with me a way that her sister used to make it, and I kind of took a riff off of that and explored and tried different flavors and have landed on this one. So I guess you could call this an authentic pink chai Makhani sauce. So let's get started with roasting our spices. So we're gonna start the Makhani sauce by toasting the spices we're gonna use today. You can absolutely use store-bought pre-ground spices if you don't wanna do this step or you don't have a spice grinder, but I always think if you're gonna go to the trouble of batch cooking something and putting it away so you can use it over and over, a fresh spice, nothing beats it. And I know it's an extra step, but this really elevates your cooking and takes minutes to do. So I'm gonna drop in the black pepper, the cinnamon, clove, cardamom, and coriander seeds. We're gonna lightly toast these and then we're gonna grind them up to have ready for when we're gonna add them to our sauce. I can already smell the cinnamon. It's such a lovely toasty spice and nothing beats like freshly roasting and grinding these. So our spices are nice and toasted. I'm gonna grind them up in my spice grinder. When I first started cooking, I really wanted to know why my food never tasted as flavorful as when I ate out. And I've come to learn over the years that seasoning is the most important thing, from just your basics like salt all the way up to these masala blends. If you can take the time to infuse the flavors in your food, it makes all the difference in the taste. Since we're making a butter chicken sauce or Makhani sauce, we have to start with butter. And anyways, it can't be good Punjabi food if it's not filled with butter, can it? Okay, now for cooking the sauce, we're gonna put in a bay leaf, and we're also gonna drop in our onion, garlic, ginger, and tomato all together. Unlike a normal tadka, like you don't want this to taste like it's a tadka, like it's tempered all the way, because if you over caramelize the tomatoes, if they get too sweet, you won't get the right flavor in your sauce. You actually want the tomatoes to be a little tart here. So we're gonna cook everything together for about 2 minutes. We're not looking for it to be fully cooked through, but just lightly cooked. We're adding salt right now just to help the tomatoes cook down a little bit, and we'll add the rest of our seasonings when we assemble the sauce. Our tomato and onion mixture has been cooking for about 5 minutes now, and it's the perfect consistency for us to start blending up the sauce. If you remember from our tadka video, in that preparation of tempering, we had cooked all the moisture out, but if you look closely here, we've actually got quite a bit of water content still in the tomatoes and onions, and this is how we want it. We want it to be just a little bit runny, because this water content will help us create a more silky, creamy sauce. So what I can taste now is that the onion is cooked, the garlic is cooked, the tomato is still a little bit tart. It hasn't cooked all the way down, and that's exactly how I want it because I'm gonna add cream later, and that cream is gonna balance out the tart. Also, the salt level is right. If I don't taste it now, I don't know if I have the right amount of salt. I can't adjust it later. So I can't stress enough that you have to taste at different steps of when you're cooking to really know if your recipe is coming together. So now we're gonna puree this sauce down with our immersion blender. And a little tip, if you don't have one of these in your kitchen, this is the secret tool for getting your kids to eat vegetables. The immersion blender has saved me so many times in that I can puree things, add it to dishes. It also creates a really creamy consistency to everything. And what I've learned from my kids is that they think they don't eat onions, they think they don't eat tomatoes, but they do when they're pureed and blended and you can't really feel them in your mouth. It's always usually a consistency thing for kids. So bonus tip, if you have children, you need an immersion blender in your life. But let's go and get this sauce as creamy and pureed as we can now. Okay, so this is a completely optional step, but I do try and do this whenever I have the time to do it. And that is I'm gonna sieve all of the sauce that I already pureed. And then what's gonna happen is there'll be little bits and pieces left in the top of the sieve and I will puree them again. I know it's tedious, I know it takes longer, but this is really how you get an absolutely smooth and creamy makhani sauce. If you don't do this, it's perfectly fine. It still tastes great. It doesn't affect the flavor, it only affects the texture. So now that I've gotten this sauce to the consistency that I want it to be, let's finish it with some spices and cream. Before we get into that, I will tell you that if you're planning on freezing a makhani sauce, this is the perfect point to put it away and freeze it. And then when you defrost it, carry on from here. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add in those beautiful spices that we roasted and ground in the beginning. The reason I held off putting these spices in until now is because they're actually pretty delicate in their flavors, and the less time you cook them, the better. Now I'm gonna add the star ingredient, which is the makhani or whipped butter. If you don't have makhani, then you can also just use an unsalted full fat butter from the grocery store. I'm gonna pop that right in there. And also just a little bit of honey. Once that blends together and melts down, we'll give it a taste test before we add the whipped cream to make sure the seasoning is where we want it to be. Okay, the makhani's melted in really nice. I'm gonna give it one more taste test. The spices are coming through really nice. The salt is perfect for me, so I'm good with it. At this point, you could also add more salt if you needed to, or if your tomatoes were really tart, you could add a touch of honey, but I think it's ready for the cream. So I'm gonna add in just under 1/4 cup of cream. And actually, again, when I've added about half of my cream, I'm gonna taste it and make sure it hasn't gotten too sweet. I find that when we get butter chicken or shahi paneer at restaurants, it's far too sweet. The flavor of the tomatoes is entirely lost, and we don't want that. So every time you make a batch, you have to taste test at this point because the tomatoes might be sweeter or tartar depending on the time of year, depending on the produce that's available. So take your time with this step. Don't just dump all the cream in at one go. So this is a little trick for getting a bit of extra sheen and kind of color into your makhani sauces. We're gonna warm up a little bit of butter. I've got about half a tablespoon, and I'm gonna sprinkle in a little bit of tangy mirch or paprika. Now just make sure you're using a spice that isn't really hot chili and is more for color. These are usually called tangy mirch, Kashmiri mirch, paprika. They all work the same, and get it nice and hot so the color comes out of the spice. We'll drop that on there. And now we're gonna finish off our sauce with kasuri methi and garam masala, which are both finishing spices, and then we're good to go. Freshly ground kasuri methi. a little bit of my homemade garam masala, and Makhani sauce complete. So just a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of patience, and we have ourselves a homemade, healthy, from scratch Makhani sauce, which I personally think tastes better than anything you can get at a restaurant. This is ready to go as is, and today's recipe made a batch of about 4.5 to 5 cups. It's just shy of 5 cups. You can use it over chicken, obviously, to make yourself a butter chicken. You can use it with paneer, with tofu, over vegetables, or even as a pasta sauce. When I put these away in the fridge or freezer, I find they do get just a little bit thick as they sit. So definitely when you heat it up, you can add a touch of cream or water to thin it out, and it's ready to go. I hope you'll give this a try. It is really worth the effort. It tastes amazing, and your family's gonna love this one. If you try it, let me know how it turns out. If there's a recipe that you want us to make next, leave us a comment in the DMs or leave us a comment below. I'm so used to Instagram. On that note, you can also find me there. I'm at Pink Chai. But since you're here right now, do hit the subscribe button. It really does help, and I look forward to chatting with you guys in my next video.